The Winter Olympics in Beijing is just the moment that China needed. I mean, one thing that China knew was that it was hated all around the world. Even countries like Thailand and the Philippines, that were once getting closer to Beijing, suddenly distanced themselves amidst the growing anti China sentiment across the world. So, China thought, let's organize a grand show and win back much of the influence that we have lost. But what actually happened was totally against China's vision. Hi and welcome. You are watching TFI Global, the foreign affairs and geopolitical analysis arm of the TFI Media Group. I am your host Sanbir, and in this video I will tell you how the Beijing Winter Olympics have become a PR disaster for China. Let's begin. If the ongoing Beijing Winter Olympics was a PR exercise for China, it is bound to go down as the worst PR exercise by a country in recent times, and we have our reasons to claim this. From manhandling a Dutch television reporter just outside the venue of the Winter Olympics opening ceremony to further antagonizing its rivals like India and South Korea, China has done everything that it could have done to show its ugly face to the world at the Beijing Winter Olympics. China's grand show at the Beijing Olympics was supposed to reinvigorate business ties with countries like South Korea that are looking to decouple from China for the past 2 years. But all that Beijing has managed to do is annoy the Koreans. A conservative South Korean civic group even tore up the Chinese flag during a rally near the Chinese embassy in Seoul on Friday. They were protesting against controversial refereeing against some South Korean short track speed skaters at the ongoing Winter Olympics. The protesters demanded that China apologize for biased refereeing at the Winter Olympics, and the protesters were also angry about the silence of their government against Beijing's unfair actions. In the men's 1000 meters semi-final on Monday, South Korea's Hwang Dae-hyun and Lee Jun-seo got disqualified from their respective heats for an illegal pass and lane change respectively. After these decisions, Chinese skaters were able to reach the final and grab the gold and silver medals. As if this wasn't enough, South Korea also got angry about the cultural appropriation by China. A performer at the opening ceremony wore a traditional Korean dress called hanbok. China was clearly trying to pass off Korean attire as its own, which has stoked anti-Chinese sentiment in South Korea. Both social media and mainstream media in the country have criticized China's brash behavior. Even the center-left Hankyoreh newspaper condemned China's actions and stated, "We need to continue developing neighborly relations with China, but we also need to be willing to stand up against attempts to distort history." Cultural appropriation by China is a long-standing issue in South Korea. China has been passing off South Korean culture as its own since the 2000s. It has passed off South Korea's kimchi dish as Chinese food. Even last year, the South Koreans vented online about the Chinese search engine Baidu's act of listing a number of Korean foods such as kimchi and samgyetang as cuisines of Chinese origin. And China's present actions are only making it worse. South Korea is not the only country on Beijing's agenda. It also wanted to repair its bruised image in India and affirm a sentiment of friendship with Moscow. But just before the Beijing Winter Olympics, China made a huge mistake. It decided to play mind games with India and made a soldier, Chief Bao, who was involved in the Galwan Valley clash with the Indian Army in 2020, the torchbearer at the ongoing games. The next thing we know, India announced a full diplomatic boycott of the Winter Olympics. It had every reason to do so. The entire episode also ended up embittering Sino-Russian ties. Russian President Vladimir Putin has been trying to play mediator between India and China's actions came out looking like an effort to undermine Putin's desired mediator role. And therefore, Putin too decided to humiliate China during the Beijing Winter Olympics. Here is what Putin did to Xi Jinping and the CCP during his visit to China. Putin kept his visit to Beijing extremely short. Putin did not attend the lavish state banquet organized by Xi Jinping for all heads of states that visited Beijing for the Winter Olympics' opening ceremony. Putin was considered the most important guest in the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics. Yet, the venue of Xi Jinping's meeting with Putin on February 4th was only the Diayuthi State Guest House and not the Great Hall of the People. This either shows that China wanted to show Putin who the boss is, or that Putin refused to meet Jinping at the Great Hall of the People, where the state banquet was held. Putin made it stunningly clear to Xi Jinping that Moscow's ties with India will always be prioritized over Russia's relations with China. The Winter Olympics opening ceremony saw very low viewership across the world, but there was a major highlight during the event: Chinese propaganda about its humane treatment of Uyghurs. Yes, after killing, raping, and torturing millions of Uyghur Muslims in the Xinjiang region, Beijing actually had the temerity to field country skier Denigir Yilamujiang as one of the cauldron lighters. The Chinese state media proudly claimed that Yilamujiang has a Uyghur heritage. But where is Yilamujiang now? Well, having used the Uyghur woman for sheer propaganda, China has now sidetracked her. After her Olympics debut on Saturday, Yilamu Jiang avoided the media and slipped away through a mixed zone along with other Chinese athletes. She has disappeared, and Chinese authorities have declined to comment on her sudden disappearance from the media limelight. And if there was any doubt about China's cruel character, it was telecast live on Friday when China hosted the Winter Olympics opening ceremony at the Bird's Nest in Beijing. A Dutch television reporter was literally manhandled and stopped from presenting live on air just outside the venue. The journalist could be heard saying, "We are now being pulled out of here." He added, "We have just been expelled from another area, so I'm afraid we'll have to come back to you later." So, the harsh atmosphere for foreign and private media in China was caught live. This may well have been a brash attempt by the Chinese authorities to censor a foreign journalist, and that too without any reason. For China, the Winter Olympics were a means of controlling the damage done to its image over the years, but China has only ended up affirming its cruel, selfish, and intolerant image. This is quite literally a terrible PR exercise on the communist country's part.